Hello, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I am Steve Howlett, Assistant Director of Public Works, and this item is the tree program and landscape standards update. Recommendation that the City Council receive and file an update of the citywide tree program and landscape standards. Background: Parks Division trees. The Parks Division of the Public Works Department is responsible for maintaining 36 general fund parks, 1.7 miles of Oxnard Beach, the citywide street landscaping that includes public rights-of-way, over 32,000 trees, and conducts citywide graffiti abatement of city-owned properties and within and adjacent to city-owned rights-of-way. With the passing of Measure E effective April 1st, 2021, funding was identified to begin addressing long-deferred tree maintenance. The annual operating budgets for the Parks Tree Subdivision was approximately $1.25 million in fiscal year 2021 and 22, $1.5 million in fiscal year 22-23, and our current fiscal year of $1.3 million. Parks developed and implemented a plan that started in fiscal year 21-22 to address many years of deferred tree maintenance. The implementation of this plan included developing a 5-year grid pruning cycle for all city-maintained trees, also awarding a grid pruning contract, awarding a separate on-call tree services contract, and contracting with consulting companies to provide assessments and recommendations for all city trees. This includes a separate hazardous tree assessment with mitigation recommendations for the eucalyptus trees. Both the grid pruning contract and the on-call tree services contract serve both the general fund trees and special districts trees. However, task orders for the special districts trees are issued separately and invoiced separately to ensure each district is only charged for the trees that are identified in their formation documents. Background: Special Districts Division trees. The Special Districts Division of the Public Works Department is responsible for 50 assessment districts containing 17 parks, the street landscapes for several districts, and over 15,000 trees throughout all of the districts. However, some of these districts are underfunded or partially funded due to the requirements related to the assessment changes that were brought upon by the approval of Proposition 218 in 1996. Therefore, some of the LMDs, Maintenance Assessment District, and Waterways Assessment District have not been able to perform routine maintenance of their landscapes and trees without a change in their assessment via a vote of the property owners or registered voters as applicable. Background: Landscape standards. The landscape standards were last approved by the City Council in 1988. In response to water restrictions, state regulations, and the changing climate, it has become necessary for the city to update the landscape standards for both new commercial, industrial, and residential construction, as well as provide guidelines for residents and businesses to renovate their existing landscapes. Discussion: Parks Division grid pruning. Staff addressed the deferred maintenance of the citywide general fund trees through the development and implementation of a 5-year grid pruning plan. One of the challenges of developing this plan was not having accurate tree inventory data because the last comprehensive inventory was done approximately 15 years ago. Due to the lack of reliable data, staff made certain assumptions to formulate a plan that will prune over 32,000 general fund trees within a 5-year time frame. This plan does have some flexibility built in to accommodate for unanticipated changes and delays. The first year of work, which was fiscal year 21-22, focused on all 6,646 arterial street trees throughout the city. The grid pruning plan for years 2 through 5 are to trim the remaining general fund trees, regardless of the planting location, starting at the eastern side of the city and working to the west. Here is a map of all of the trees that were grid pruned in fiscal year 21-22. These are the arterial streets, and all of them are identified in green as being complete. In year 2, fiscal year 22-23, the number of trees that were grid pruned was 5,027. This was lower than our goal because the tree services were shifted to complete the hazardous tree work for the eucalyptus trees before the specified funding expired. There were 101 eucalyptus trees removed, in addition to another 285 eucalyptus trees that were trimmed. For year 3, which is our current fiscal year, the target number of general fund trees to be grid pruned is 7,061. An additional 10,840 trees are being pruned by the Special Districts Division. The fiscal year 23-24 grid pruning map, which I will show in a second, shows in green all of the trees that have been completed in year 1, 2, and 3. However, that map does not show the arterial street trees. The remaining trees that will be completed by the end of April of this year are shown with a gray dot, and the trees that will be completed by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2024, are shown in gray. The red circles of the map identify the remaining areas of the city that will be grid pruned in fiscal years 4 and 5. So here is the map that I was just referring to. You can see that we were moving from east to west, so all of the areas that are in green have been completed. All of the areas with a gray dot will be done within the next 2 months, and all of the solid gray areas will be completed by June 30th. So with the completion of those trees, the remaining areas for years 4 and 5 are in the red circles. Discussion. Based on current levels of funding, it is anticipated that the 5-year grid pruning plan will be completed on schedule. However, due to the term of the existing grid pruning contract, staff will need to rebid this service in order to complete year 5. The costs for grid pruning are expected to increase with the award of a new contract. Discussion: special districts grid pruning. During the preparation of the special districts budgets for fiscal year 23-24, the property owners within the districts expressed their strong desire to participate in the tree grid pruning for their neighborhoods. As such, staff worked with the current grid pruning contractor to develop a schedule to service approximately 10,840 trees that are located mostly in the LMDs and some of the CFDs. The estimated total cost for this grid pruning within the special districts is $745,000. Each district is responsible for funding their trees per their formation documents. Staff also developed a 5-year grid pruning schedule for each district that will reflect the city's 5-year grid pruning cycle in perpetuity, subject to available district funds in the future. The communities of Harbor Island, St. Tropez, Greystone, The Point, and Cameroon Ranch did not receive grid pruning services this fiscal year due to their inability to levy the additional funds necessary through the annual levy process. However, these districts have requested the grid pruning services for fiscal year 24-25, and staff anticipates being able to fund these remaining 650 trees through a combination of both available funds within each district's new fiscal year budget and the available funds within each district's reserves. Discussion: consulting services for tree assessments. In January of 22, the city completed a tree program review and assessment that was conducted through a contract service with DUDEC. This report provides recommendations for addressing existing maintenance needs, as well as ways to make our citywide tree program more resilient and sustainable for the future. This assessment helps solidify the 5-year grid pruning plan, as well as providing tree recommendations for the new landscape standards. In January of 22, DUDEC also was contracted to identify, assess, and prioritize the eucalyptus trees that are located within the public rights-of-way and some general fund parks. In recent years, some of these windrow trees have fallen, which also resulted in claims against the city. The recommendations for mitigation were to either remove, trim, or increase the level of assessment for each specific tree. In fiscal year 22-23, 101 eucalyptus trees were removed and 285 eucalyptus trees were trimmed. Additionally, 78 dead standing or high priority trees of various species were also removed. All of these trees were in the public rights-of-way and in some general fund parks. Based on available funding, staff will continue to address the remaining lower priority trees over the next 2 years. Staff has observed that many of the eucalyptus trees throughout the city will continue to decline. The goal is to have consultants who specialize in urban forestry continue their regular assessments of the remaining eucalyptus trees. Therefore, as a best management practice, the eucalyptus trees will be assessed every 2 years by a third-party certified arborist. During a recent eucalyptus tree assessment performed by Rincon Consultants, 1,100 trees were assessed by a certified arborist that specializes in risk assessment. Of those assessed, 139 were identified for removal by December 31st, 2024 of this calendar year. A page from the assessment showing the trees at College Park is included in the next slide. The priority 1 trees that are identified in red will be removed by the end of this calendar year. Priorities 2 through 4 require specific maintenance, mostly pruning, within a time frame between 6 months and a year. The non-priority trees, or NAs, are identified in purple, and they do not have any maintenance needs. So here is the screenshot that I was telling you about. This is 1 page out of the assessment by Rincon. So all of the areas with groupings of eucalyptus trees have a page similar to this. You'll notice at the top of the screen, there is a row of green and purple along Oxnard Boulevard. There are no trees needing work along that area because those were identified by 2 years ago by Dudek, and they were addressed 2 years ago, and therefore those trees along Oxnard Boulevard are in good shape, as well as many other trees throughout College Park. However, there are 3 trees identified in red that will be removed by December of 2024, as well as some other areas that just require some corrective pruning. Finally, the city has been awarded a U.S. Department of Agriculture urban forestry grant in the amount of $958,000 to fund 100% of the tree inventory costs in disadvantaged communities and 50% of the tree inventory costs for non-disadvantaged communities. The required 50% match, or $334,000 from the city, has already been encumbered in the current parks operations budget. Staff received notice from that the city will be receiving the grant fund by March 31st, 2024. That was the information we had at the time of writing this report. However, we have had further communications with the funding source, and they have confirmed that the actual receiving of the funds will occur in June of 2024. The scope of work that will be provided for this grant includes a citywide tree inventory with a level 2 risk assessment for each tree, utilizing LiDAR, laser 3D imaging technology, to measure the canopy shade coverage citywide, funding the removal of an estimated 600 high priority trees, and provide urban forestry management training for city staff. A level 2 risk assessment is a 360-degree visual evaluation of each tree where the crown, trunk, root flare, above ground roots, and site conditions are all evaluated by a certified arborist. The data that will be collected during the tree inventory will include information for individual tree GPS locations, the species, dimensions, an arborist health assessment, and various other data points. This information will provide staff the needed clarity on tree count, locations, and conditions of each tree within the city's urban forest to create and manage the city's urban forest master plan. Discussion landscape standards. Staff from both Public Works and Community Development began working together in fiscal year 22-23 to revise the outdated city landscape standards. With the assistance of Jordan and Gilbert Landscape Architects, staff hosted 3 community outreach meetings on April 6th of 23, May 25th of 23, and June 8th of 23. Based on outreach, consultant recommendations, state mandates for landscaping and water use, and resident and contractor input from the community outreach meetings, staff has started drafting the revised landscape standards in addition to developing 3 separate plans for demonstration areas that are based on these new standards. These demonstration areas will provide the community with actual landscape improvements within the street landscapes that apply to the practices that are identified in the draft landscape standards. The next steps for this calendar year are to present the draft landscape standards and plans for the 3 demonstration areas to both the Planning Commission and the Parks and Recreation and Community Services Commission. Invitations to the commission meetings will be provided through social media, as well as direct invitations to the attendees of the community outreach meetings. Once the draft landscape standards and demonstration area plans have been reviewed by the commissions, they will be presented to the Public Works and Transportation Committee with recommendations from both the commissions and the community. Financial impact. There is no direct financial impact to this item, as it is a receive and file report. However, in closing, I'd like to show on the left, it is the first fiscal year of the grid printing. This is just the arterial street trees that were completed. And on the right, you see the trees that have been completed to date and the trees that will be completed at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th. And then finally, the areas that are circled in red will be completed in fiscal years 4 and 5. So this shows the totality of our accomplishment over the last 3 years of our grid printing program. So that concludes this report, and staff is available for any questions. Thank you.